I should have known something was wrong when Austin Blackwell smiled at me during my interview. Not the polite, professional smile most hiring managers wear like expensive cologne, but something sharper, hungrier. The kind of smile that said he'd already decided I was exactly what he needed, and not necessarily in a good way. "Chloe," he said, rolling my name around his mouth like he was tasting wine. "MIT graduate, summa cum laude, 3 years at Goldman Sachs. Impressive." He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "But tell me, what makes you think you can handle the intensity we demand here at Blackwell & Associates?" I straightened my blazer and met his gaze. "I thrive under pressure, Mr. Blackwell. I've consistently exceeded targets in high-stress environments, and I'm not afraid of hard work." "Hard work?" he chuckled. "I like that. You know, Chloe, this industry isn't for everyone. We separate the wheat from the chaff pretty quickly around here. The office was everything I'd dreamed of when I'd first decided to pursue corporate law. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. Mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound legal volumes. Abstract art that probably cost more than my yearly rent. The firm handled major mergers and acquisitions, the kind of cases that made careers and six-figure bonuses. "I understand the demands," I said. "I'm prepared for long hours and challenging work." "Good." His smile widened. "Because here's the thing about our firm, Chloe. We don't just practice law, we live it. When I started this company 15 years ago, I made a promise to our clients that we would be available 24/7, 365. That means when duty calls, we answer, no matter what." I nodded enthusiastically. This was exactly the kind of commitment I wanted to make. After years of being overlooked at Goldman Sachs, where my ideas were stolen by male colleagues and my contributions minimized in meetings, I was ready for a place that would appreciate my dedication. "The compensation reflects that commitment, of course," Austin continued. "Starting salary is $140, plus bonuses that can easily double that figure for top performers. But the money isn't why you're here, is it?" "No, sir. I want to build something meaningful, make a real impact." "Excellent answer." He stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Chloe. I have a feeling you're going to fit in perfectly here." That was 6 months ago. 6 months that feel like 6 years. I'm writing this now from my apartment at 3:17 a.m., my laptop burning my thighs as I balance it on my knees. The coffee table is covered with legal briefs. My dinner, a sad container of takeout pad thai, growing cold beside stacks of discovery documents. My reflection in the dark window shows a woman I barely recognize, hollow-eyed, pale, wearing the same wrinkled blouse I put on yesterday morning. The promised bonuses never materialized. Neither did the meaningful work. Instead, I've become Austin's personal workhorse, grinding through document reviews, contract revisions, and busy work that keeps me chained to my desk from dawn until well past midnight. "Chloe, I need you to stay late tonight," became his daily mantra, always delivered with that same predatory smile. Always framed as a request but spoken like a command. "The Henderson merger needs to close by Friday, and these contracts won't review themselves." At first I told myself it was normal. New associate pays her dues, proves her worth, climbs the ladder. But normal firms pay overtime. Normal firms respect labor laws. Normal firms don't expect their employees to work 90 hours a week for free. Because that's what it is. Free. Austin has perfected the art of exploitation, dancing around employment law with the skill of someone who's done this before. Technically, I'm salaried, which means no overtime pay. But he's weaponized that classification, demanding I work weekends, holidays, and vacations under the threat of performance reviews and team commitment evaluations. The law is clear, Chloe. He told me last month when I finally worked up the courage to ask about compensation for the 70-hour weeks. Salaried exempt employees aren't entitled to overtime. You knew what you were signing up for, but I didn't know I was signing up to miss my sister's wedding because of an urgent contract review that could have waited until Monday. I didn't know I was signing up to spend Christmas Eve alone in the office, formatting exhibits for a case that wouldn't go to trial for another year. I didn't know I was signing up to watch my savings account dwindle as I ordered dinner delivery every night because I was too exhausted to grocery shop. The worst part isn't even the hours or the money. it's watching Austin parade around the office like some benevolent king, taking credit for work his underpaid associates produce. Last week, he presented my entire research memo on securities fraud to the State Bar Association's monthly meeting, never once mentioning my name. The standing ovation was for him. The networking opportunities were his. The professional recognition that should have launched my career became another gold star on his already glittering resume. I've started keeping detailed records. Every email, every unreasonable demand, every violation of basic human decency. My phone's voice recorder has become my best friend, carefully documenting our conversations when Washington's one-party consent law allows it. I tell myself I'm just being thorough, preparing for the performance review that will finally recognize my contributions. But deep down, I know I'm gathering ammunition. Tonight's breaking point came at 11:30, when Austin called me into his office with yet another urgent project. The Yamamoto Industries acquisition needed a complete regulatory compliance review by tomorrow morning, he said. Hundreds of pages of international trade law that would take any reasonable person at least 3 days. I know it's a lot to ask, he said, not looking sorry at all. But this is what separates the real lawyers from the wannabes. Think you can handle it? I wanted to tell him where he could shove his fake concern and impossible deadlines. Instead, I smiled and said, "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. I'll have it ready first thing tomorrow." Now here I am, 4 hours into what will undoubtedly be an all-nighter, wondering when exactly I stopped being a person and became a machine designed to generate billable hours for Austin Blackwell's profit margins. But as I stare at my reflection in the window, something shifts. Maybe it's the exhaustion talking, or maybe it's finally time to stop being a victim of my own ambition. Either way, I'm done being Austin Blackwell's unpaid intern. Tomorrow, everything changes. The next morning arrived like a slap in the face. I'd managed exactly 47 minutes of sleep, curled up on the office couch with my blazer as a blanket. The Yamamoto compliance review sat completed on Austin's desk, 234 pages of meticulously researched regulatory analysis that had taken me until 6 a.m. to finish. I was brewing my 4th cup of coffee when Austin strolled in at 9:30, whistling some tune I didn't recognize. He looked refreshed, relaxed, probably fresh from his morning yoga session, or whatever rich men do to maintain their glow of superiority. "Morning, Chloe," he called out cheerfully. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I wanted to throw my scalding coffee at his perfectly pressed shirt. Instead, I managed a weak smile. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. The Yamamoto review is on your desk." "Already? Impressive." He didn't even glance toward his office. "Listen, slight change of plans. Yamamoto's been pushed back 2 weeks. Client got cold feet." I felt something crack inside my chest. 2 weeks? Yeah, you know how these Japanese companies are, very deliberate decision makers. He shrugged like he was discussing the weather. "But hey, that just means we're ahead of schedule when they're ready to move forward." Good initiative on your part. Good initiative. I'd sacrificed an entire night of my life, my health, my sanity, for a project that was now sitting useless on his desk because he couldn't be bothered to check his emails before assigning me work. The review I'd bled over for 8 straight hours was worth less than the paper it was printed on. "Is everything all right?" Austin asked, tilting his head with mock concern. "You look a little tired." "I'm fine," I lied. "Great, because I need you to handle the Morrison depositions today. Jenkins called in sick, and those videos won't review themselves." Jenkins, the golden boy associate, who somehow managed to work reasonable hours and still get praised in every staff meeting. Rumor had it he was Austin's nephew, though nobody dared confirm it. What I did know was that whenever Jenkins had a conflict, a vacation, or a convenient illness, his work magically became my responsibility. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? The Morrison case involved a sexual harassment lawsuit against one of our clients, a tech startup with more venture capital than common sense. My job was to review hours of deposition videos, looking for inconsistencies in testimony. It was mind-numbing work, made worse by the subject matter, watching executives stumble through increasingly creative explanations for their predatory behavior. I was 3 hours into the first deposition when Emily knocked on my cubicle wall. Emily was the only other woman associate at the firm, a brilliant immigration lawyer who'd somehow managed to maintain both her sanity and her sense of humor, despite working for Austin. "Lunch?" she asked, holding up a sandwich bag. I gestured helplessly at my screen. "Can't. Austin needs these done by 5. Emily's expression darkened. "When's the last time you took a real break?" I had to think about it. "Tuesday? Maybe Monday." "Chloe, this is insane. Even prisoners get exercise time." "It's temporary," I said, repeating the lie I'd been telling myself for months. "Just until I prove myself." Emily sat down in the empty chair beside my desk, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Can I tell you something? Something you can't repeat?" I nodded, grateful for any distraction from the depositions. I keep track of everyone's hours. It's a little obsession of mine. I like data. "Austin billed you for 92 hours last week alone. The firm charged clients for 92 hours of your work." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. There are only 168 hours in a week." "Exactly." Emily's eyes flashed with anger. "He's been padding your timesheets, charging clients for work you did at double or triple speed and pocketing the difference. You're not just being overworked, Chloe. You're being defrauded." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd known Austin was exploiting my time, but I hadn't realized he was literally stealing money by misrepresenting my work to clients. It wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. "How do you know this?" I whispered. "I have access to the billing system. Paralegal privileges." Emily glanced around nervously. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but someone needs to know. Austin has been doing this for years, cycling through young associates every 6 to 8 months. They burn out, quit, and he brings in fresh meat." "What happened to my predecessor?" "Janet Morrison?" Nervous breakdown. "She's working at a nonprofit in Portland now, making $30,000 a year and actually sleeping at night." Emily's voice turned bitter. "Austin told everyone she couldn't handle the pressure of real law." I thought about Janet's empty office, which Austin had turned into a storage room for his golf clubs and expensive wine collection. I'd wondered why a successful associate would leave such a prestigious firm. Now I knew. She hadn't left, she'd escaped. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Emily was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was you once. Different year, same story. I was too scared to do anything about it, and I've regretted it every day since. But you're smarter than I was, Chloe. You document everything." She was right. My obsessive record-keeping wasn't just neurosis. It was evidence. Every impossible deadline, every unpaid hour, every ethical violation was sitting in a carefully organized folder on my personal laptop. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Emily said carefully. "I'm just saying that knowledge is power, and you have more knowledge than Austin realizes." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I finished the Morrison depositions, but my mind was elsewhere, processing Emily's revelation. Austin wasn't just a demanding boss. He was a criminal who'd built his success on the backs of exploited associates. Every luxury in his office, every expensive suit, every client dinner at 5-star restaurants was paid for with stolen labor. At 7 p.m., Austin appeared at my cubicle with another stack of files. "Good news, Chloe. The Henderson merger just got more complicated. Environmental issues, regulatory snags. You know how it goes. I need you to pull an all-nighter on the due diligence." I looked at the files, then at Austin's expectant face. For the first time in months, I saw him clearly. Not as an intimidating authority figure, but as a petty thief in an expensive suit. "Of course," I said, taking the files. "I'll get right on it." But as Austin walked away, whistling that same infuriating tune, I wasn't thinking about due diligence or environmental compliance. I was thinking about Emily's words. Knowledge is power. And I was thinking about an email I'd been drafting in my head for weeks, the one that would change everything. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the office emptied around me. Security guards made their rounds, janitors started their evening routines, and I sat alone in my cubicle, surrounded by evidence of Austin Blackwell's crimes. My personal laptop sat hidden in my desk drawer, containing 6 months of meticulously documented abuse. Every forged timesheet, every impossible deadline, every violation of labor law was cataloged with timestamps, screenshots, and voice recordings. I had been so careful, so thorough, telling myself I was just being professional. But Emily was right. I hadn't been documenting for professional reasons. I'd been building a case. The Henderson files could wait. Tonight, I had more important work to do. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new email draft. The cursor blinked in the empty message field, waiting for words that would either destroy my career or save it. Austin thought he was untouchable, protected by his money and reputation. He thought associates like me were disposable, too desperate and ambitious to fight back. He thought wrong. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my options. I could quit, walk away, find another job, and chalk this up to experience. I could suffer in silence like Janet Morrison, like Emily, like countless other women who'd been chewed up and spit out by Austin Blackwell's machine. Or I could fight. The email's recipient field stared back at me, waiting for an address that would change everything. I had several options: the Washington State Bar Association's Ethics Committee, the Department of Labor, the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Each one represented a different kind of nuclear option. But as I sat there in the empty office, surrounded by the ghosts of Austin's previous victims, I realized I didn't want to choose just one. Why settle for a single torpedo when I could launch an entire arsenal? I smiled for the first time in weeks and began to type. The email started simply: "To whom it may concern. I am writing to report systematic violations of labor law, client billing fraud, and criminal conspiracy at the law firm of Blackwell and Associates." But simple was just the beginning. What followed would be anything but simple. It would be thorough, devastating, and absolutely unforgiving. Austin Blackwell had spent months teaching me about the law, about power, about what it meant to be ruthless in pursuit of victory. He'd been an excellent teacher. Now it was time for his final exam. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming a detective in my own life. Every morning, I'd arrive at the office with the same exhausted smile, accepting Austin's impossible assignments with practiced grace. But underneath that compliant exterior, I was methodically building the case that would end his career. The beauty of working for a law firm was that I understood exactly what kind of evidence would be admissible in court. Austin had trained me well in the art of building airtight cases. He just never imagined I'd use those skills against him. My personal laptop became a digital fortress of documentation. I installed encrypted file storage software and created a backup system that would make NSA whistleblowers proud. Every piece of evidence was time-stamped, cross-referenced, and stored in multiple secure locations. The billing fraud was even worse than Emily had initially revealed. I gained access to the client invoicing system during one of my many late nights. Austin had given me his password months ago, trusting that I was too exhausted and demoralized to question anything beyond my immediate assignments. What I found made my stomach turn. For the Henderson merger alone, Austin had billed me at 95 hours over 3 days. Mathematically impossible, unless I'd learned to clone myself. He'd charged the client my full hourly rate of $450 for work that included document formatting, research compilation, and strategic analysis tasks he'd assigned to me with explicit instructions to just get it done quickly. But the Henderson case was just the tip of the iceberg. Going back 6 months, I found a pattern of systematic fraud that totaled over $200,000 in overbilled hours attributed to my work alone. The man wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from clients, from the legal system, from everyone who believed Blackwell and Associates represented excellence in corporate law. I printed every fraudulent invoice, every impossible timesheet, every email trail that showed Austin knowingly billing for work that couldn't have been completed in the time claimed. The stack of evidence grew so large I had to buy a filing cabinet for my apartment, but documentation was only half the battle. I needed witnesses, people willing to testify about Austin's systematic abuse. That meant carefully approaching other associates and former employees without alerting Austin to my investigation. Emily became my unofficial partner in this endeavor. She introduced me to David Park, a junior associate who'd been Austin's punching bag for 8 months. David was Korean American, Harvard Law Review, and absolutely brilliant at tax law. He was also barely hanging on to his sanity. He makes me work weekends, then tells clients I'm unavailable when they want to discuss the cases on Monday. David told us during a clandestine lunch meeting at a restaurant downtown. I've lost 3 major clients because Austin convinced them I was unreliable. Do you have proof? I asked. David pulled out his phone and showed us a text thread. Austin had explicitly instructed him to work through the weekend on a complex tax restructuring, then sent emails to the client on Monday morning claiming David was taking personal time and couldn't be reached for consultation. He's sabotaging us, Emily said grimly, making us do the work, then destroying our professional reputation so we can't leave and compete with him. The pattern was becoming clear. Austin didn't just want free labor, he wanted trapped labor. Associates who were too professionally damaged to leave, too financially desperate to resist, too isolated to organize against him. I thought about Janet Morrison, my predecessor who'd suffered a nervous breakdown. Had she discovered the same things I was discovering? Had she tried to fight back, only to be crushed by Austin's superior resources and connections? The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Austin's own secretary, Mrs. Patricia Walsh. Patricia had worked for the firm for 12 years, since before Austin had fully refined his system of exploitation. She was in her 60s, utterly professional, and apparently fed up with watching young lawyers get destroyed. He did this to my daughter, she told me quietly, appearing at my cubicle during one of Austin's long client dinners. Not here. At his previous firm in California, she was a promising attorney just like you. He broke her. Patricia's daughter, Lisa, had worked for Austin 7 years ago, at a smaller firm he'd managed, before starting Blackwell and Associates. The same pattern. Impossible hours, fraudulent billing, systematic abuse. Lisa had tried to report him to the California State Bar, but Austin had gotten ahead of the complaint, painting her as an unstable employee who couldn't handle professional pressure. She never practiced law again, Patricia said, her voice tight with controlled fury. She manages a bookstore in Sacramento now. Says she's happier, but I know what it cost her to walk away from everything she'd worked for. Patricia handed me a manila envelope. I've been keeping copies, just in case. Inside were photocopies of billing records, client complaints, and internal memos going back to Austin's early days at the firm. The memos were particularly damning, discussions about managing associate expectations and maximizing billable efficiency that read like a manual for workplace abuse. But the real treasure was a recorded phone call between Austin and his former partner in California. Patricia had been smart enough to keep the firm's old voicemail system when they upgraded, and Austin had never bothered to delete his archived messages. In the recording, Austin was laughing about breaking in the new associate and bragging about billing her 80 hours for work she'd completed in 20. His voice was casual, almost bored, as he described manipulating her timesheet to optimize profitability. The beauty of it, Austin's voice crackled through my earbuds, is that they're so grateful just to have the job, they'll let you get away with anything. And by the time they figure out what's happening, they're too invested to walk away. Listening to that recording was like watching a serial killer describe his method. The cold calculation, the complete absence of empathy, the casual delight in destroying someone's life for profit, it was sociopathic. I copied the recording to my encrypted drives and added it to my growing file of evidence. But more importantly, it gave me insight into Austin's psychology. He wasn't just a demanding boss or an unethical businessman. He was a predator who specifically targeted ambitious young lawyers, using their dreams against them. That night, I called my sister Jennifer in Portland. She was a journalist for The Oregonian, specializing in investigative pieces about corporate malfeasance. I couldn't tell her everything, not yet, but I needed to understand how these kinds of exposés worked. The key is multiple sources, she told me over video chat. Documents are great, but you need people willing to go on record. Victims, witnesses, insider sources. And you need to understand the power dynamics. Who benefits from the status quo? Who has the most to lose if the truth comes out? What if the person you're investigating has connections? Influence? Jennifer's expression grew serious. Then you better make sure your case is bulletproof. Because people like that don't go down easy, and they have resources to fight back. You get one shot, miss, and they'll bury you. After we hung up, I stared at my reflection in my laptop screen. Jennifer was right about getting one shot. If I was going to take down Austin Blackwell, I couldn't just wound him. I had to destroy him completely, remove his ability to hurt anyone else ever again. The email I'd started drafting wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, more comprehensive. A coordinated attack that would hit him from multiple angles simultaneously, making it impossible for him to spin the narrative or silence his accusers. I opened a new document and started planning what I privately called Operation Blackwell Down. It would be complex, requiring precise timing and multiple moving parts. But after months of executing Austin's impossible demands, I'd learned a thing or two about managing complex projects under pressure. The first phase would be gathering more evidence and witnesses. I needed at least 3 other current employees willing to testify, plus documentation of Austin's fraud going back at least 2 years. Emily and David were already on board, but I needed more. The second phase would be building external pressure. Bar association complaints, labor department investigations, client notifications about billing fraud. I'd learned from Austin himself that the key to victory was overwhelming your opponent with attacks from multiple directions. The third phase would be the kill shot, a coordinated media blitz that would destroy Austin's reputation and make him unemployable in the legal profession. Jennifer had taught me that public scandal was often more effective than legal consequences, especially for people who traded on their professional image. But first, I needed one more piece of evidence, something so damning that Austin couldn't possibly explain it away. I opened my laptop and started composing a carefully crafted email to Austin, designed to trick him into revealing the full scope of his fraud in writing. If I was right about his arrogance, he wouldn't be able to resist bragging about his system. The subject line read, "Questions about billing procedures and hour optimization." Austin thought he was untouchable. Tomorrow, I'd find out if he was right. Austin took the bait like a starving shark. My carefully crafted email had been designed to appeal to his greatest weakness, his ego. I'd framed my questions about billing procedures as admiration for his business acumen, asking for mentorship on how to optimize productivity like he did. The key was making him believe I wanted to learn his methods, not expose them. His response came within an hour, and it was everything I'd hoped for and more. "Chloe," his email began, "I'm pleased to see you're finally thinking like a real lawyer. Building a successful practice isn't just about legal expertise. It's about maximizing every billable moment and ensuring clients understand the value they're receiving." What followed was a detailed explanation of his fraud, written with the casual confidence of a man who believed he was teaching a protege rather than confessing to a future prosecutor. He explained how to creatively interpret time logs, how to bundle efficient work to justify higher billing rates, and how to manage client expectations about associate availability. The most damning paragraph made my hand shake as I read it. Remember, clients don't pay for hours, they pay for results. If you can deliver a 40-hour analysis in 20 hours due to your superior efficiency, there's no reason the client shouldn't pay the full rate. We're providing premium service, and premium service commands premium pricing. The associates who understand this principle are the ones who build lasting careers. He just admitted, in writing, to systematic billing fraud. Not only that, he'd laid out his entire philosophy of exploitation as if it were legitimate business strategy. The man's arrogance was breathtaking. I forwarded the email to my encrypted storage and printed 3 copies for my physical files. Then I crafted my response, carefully maintaining the eager student persona while fishing for even more incriminating details. "Thank you so much for this insight, Mr. Blackwell. This explains so much about the firm's success. I'm curious about how you handle situations when associates push back against these optimization strategies. Have you ever had employees who didn't understand the vision?" His second email arrived the next morning, and it was a masterclass in admitting criminal conspiracy. "Unfortunately, Not every associate has the intellectual capacity to understand sophisticated business practices. I've had to terminate several employees who couldn't adapt to our efficiency standards. The key is documentation. Always maintain detailed records of performance issues so that any potential complaints appear to be sour grapes from underperforming employees. I've found that questioning an associate's competence is far more effective than arguing billing practices. There it was, black and white admission that he'd been systematically destroying the careers of associates who discovered his fraud. Austin had just confessed to witness intimidation, document falsification, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I was printing his email when Emily appeared at my cubicle, looking frantic. "We have a problem," she whispered. "Austin just fired David." My blood went cold. "What happened?" "Someone told Austin that David was asking questions about billing procedures. He called David into his office this morning and terminated him for inability to meet firm standards. Quote, I thought about my email exchanges with Austin, the questions I'd been asking. Had I been too obvious? Was David's firing connected to my investigation? Did David say anything to anyone else? I asked. That's the thing. He swears he didn't. The only people who knew about his concerns were you, me, and Patricia. Emily's eyes widened. Chloe, what if Austin is monitoring our communications? The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made terrifying sense. Austin was paranoid about corporate espionage, always warning associates about client confidentiality and information security. What if that paranoia extended to spying on his own employees? I spent my lunch break in the parking garage, calling a friend from MIT who worked in cybersecurity. 20 minutes later, I had my answer. The firm's computer system was absolutely riddled with monitoring software. Every email, every document access, every keystroke was being logged and analyzed. Austin knew everything. But if he knew about my investigation, why hadn't he fired me? Why was he still responding to my emails, still giving me assignments, still pretending everything was normal? The answer came to me as I walked back to the office. Austin wasn't just paranoid. He was strategic. Firing David sent a message to the rest of us about what happened to troublemakers. But keeping me around, letting me think I was being clever while he monitored every move, gave him something more valuable. Intelligence about exactly how much I knew and who else might be involved. He was using my own investigation against me, turning it into a trap that would identify every potential threat to his operation. David's firing wasn't punishment. It was a test to see how I'd react. I passed that test by doing absolutely nothing. No emotional response. No questions about David's sudden departure. No change in my routine. I simply accepted the news that we'd lost another associate and asked what work needed to be redistributed. Austin seemed pleased by my reaction. I'm glad to see you're focused on what matters, Chloe. David was bright, but he lacked the killer instinct this job requires. Not everyone is cut out for excellence. I understand, I said, though what I understood was that Austin had just revealed he was actively testing his associates' loyalty. I'm committed to meeting the firm's standards. I know you are. That's why I'm giving you the Morrison case. Full responsibility, start to finish. The Morrison case, the sexual harassment lawsuit I'd been reviewing depositions for. Austin was handing me a major case, complete with client interaction and court appearances. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a career-making opportunity. But nothing about Austin was normal, and I suspected this promotion came with strings attached. I was right. Within hours of accepting the case, Austin had buried me under an avalanche of additional work. The Morrison trial prep, plus 3 other ongoing matters, plus his usual impossible deadlines. It was a setup designed to make me fail publicly and spectacularly. But Austin had made one crucial mistake. He'd given me legitimate access to the firm's complete case files, including financial records and client communications I'd never seen before. In trying to overwhelm me, he'd actually handed me the keys to his entire fraudulent empire. That night, I worked until dawn, not on the Morrison case, but on copying every piece of incriminating evidence I could access. Client contracts that showed Austin had been overbilling for years. Internal memos discussing, quote, revenue optimization strategies that were clearly fraudulent. Email chains with former partners who'd been pushed out of the firm when they'd questioned billing practices. The picture that emerged was staggering. Austin hadn't just been exploiting associates. He'd been running a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had defrauded clients out of millions of dollars over the past decade. The firm's reputation for excellence was built entirely on stolen labor and fraudulent billing. But the most shocking discovery came in a password-protected folder labeled HR Confidential. Inside were performance reviews for every associate who'd worked at the firm in the past 5 years. The reviews were exercises in character assassination, carefully crafted to destroy any credibility former employees might have if they ever tried to expose Austin's practices. Janet Morrison's file was particularly brutal. Austin had documented every minor mistake, every moment of visible exhaustion, every sign of stress-related performance decline. He built a paper trail that painted her nervous breakdown as evidence of professional incompetence, rather than workplace abuse. David's file was already being updated with similar character assassinations. Austin worked fast when it came to protecting himself. I found my own file in the same folder, and reading it was like watching someone dissect my soul with surgical precision. Every vulnerability, every moment of doubt, every sign that I might eventually push back. Austin had been documenting it all, building a preemptive case against me. But at the bottom of my file was something he hadn't expected me to see. A note about his contingency plan for my eventual termination. He'd already drafted a complaint to the State Bar Association, claiming I'd been stealing client funds and falsifying billing records. The very crimes he'd been committing, attributed to me with forged documentation and manufactured evidence. Austin wasn't just a fraudster. He was a criminal mastermind who'd spent years perfecting a system for destroying anyone who threatened him. He'd probably used the same strategy against Janet, against David, against every associate who'd gotten too close to the truth. But he'd made one critical error in his planning. In preparing to frame me for his crimes, he'd created detailed documentation of his actual billing fraud. The forged evidence he planned to use against me was so specific, so thoroughly documented, that it inadvertently proved his own guilt. I sat in my apartment at 4 a.m., surrounded by printed emails and financial records, finally understanding the true scope of what I was facing. This wasn't just about workplace abuse or billing fraud. Austin Blackwell was a sociopath who'd built his entire career on destroying other people's lives. But I wasn't Janet Morrison. I wasn't David Park. I wasn't some naive associate who would go quietly into professional exile. I was Chloe, MIT graduate, Goldman Sachs survivor, and Austin Blackwell's worst nightmare, a victim who was smarter than he was. The email I'd been crafting for weeks was almost complete. Multiple recipients, airtight evidence, perfect timing. But now I realized it needed one more element, a way to prevent Austin from using his character assassination playbook against me. I opened a new document and began typing a comprehensive confession, not of crimes I'd committed, but of crimes I'd witnessed. A detailed statement that would be impossible to discredit, corroborated by so much evidence that Austin's usual tactics would be useless. By the time the sun rose over Seattle, I had everything I needed to destroy Austin Blackwell's life the same way he'd destroyed so many others. The only question left was when to pull the trigger. The perfect moment arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late November, wrapped in the kind of coincidence that makes you believe in cosmic justice. Austin had been particularly insufferable all week, riding high on news that Blackwell and Associates had been shortlisted for Law Firm of the Year by the Seattle Business Journal. The nomination was based largely on our firm's innovative billing practices and exceptional associate productivity, achievements that I now knew were built entirely on fraud and exploitation. This could put us on the map nationally, Austin bragged during the weekly staff meeting, his chest puffed with pride. Major corporations are taking notice of what we've built here. Success recognizes success. I sat in the back of the conference room, nodding along with everyone else, while mentally calculating exactly how many crimes he'd committed to reach this moment. The irony was delicious. Austin was about to be honored for the very practices that would destroy him. But the real gift came that afternoon, when Austin made the mistake that would seal his fate. I was working on the Morrison case. Actually working, not just reviewing documents, when my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. The message was brief. Austin Blackwell ruined my life. I heard you might be interested in hearing my story. Call me. Lisa Walsh, Patricia's daughter. the one who'd been destroyed by Austin 7 years ago in California. I waited until Austin left for his usual 3-hour client dinner, which everyone knew was actually his weekly massage appointment, then called Lisa from the parking garage. "Patricia told me you're building a case against him," Lisa said without preamble. Her voice was steady, controlled, but I could hear years of suppressed anger underneath. "I want to help. Are you willing to go on record? I've been waiting 7 years for someone to ask me that question." Lisa's story was devastating. Not just because of what Austin had done to her, but because of how methodically he'd done it. She described the same pattern I was living. Impossible hours, fraudulent billing, systematic abuse. But in her case, Austin had taken it further. "He didn't just steal my work," she said. "He stole my identity. Literally. He was signing my name to legal briefs I'd never seen, billing clients for consultations I'd never had. When I confronted him, he told me I was having a nervous breakdown and needed professional help." The genius of Austin's operation was its psychological sophistication. He didn't just exploit people. He convinced them they were lucky to be exploited. He didn't just steal their work. He made them grateful for the opportunity to be robbed. "I have recordings," Lisa continued. "Conversations where he admitted everything. I was too scared to use them at the time, but I've kept them all these years." Recordings. Independent corroboration from someone with no current connection to the firm. Evidence that proved Austin's pattern of abuse went back years and crossed state lines. Lisa's testimony would transform my case from a workplace dispute into a federal criminal matter. "There's something else," Lisa said. "Austin is being investigated by the California State Bar for other complaints. 3 former associates from his previous firm have filed formal grievances in the past 2 years. The investigation is ongoing, but they're looking for additional witnesses." My heart raced. Austin wasn't just vulnerable, he was already under active investigation. My evidence wouldn't be starting a case, it would be completing one that was already in progress. That night I worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon performing life-saving surgery. My apartment transformed into a war room, documents spread across every surface, timelines drawn on whiteboards I'd bought specifically for this purpose. The email I'd been crafting evolved into something far more sophisticated. A comprehensive evidence package that would be simultaneously delivered to multiple recipients across 3 states. The Washington State Bar Association, the FBI's Seattle field office, the California investigators who were already building a case, the Seattle Business Journal's investigative team, the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. Each recipient would receive a customized version of the evidence, tailored to their specific jurisdiction and interests. The bar associations would get the ethical violations and billing fraud, the FBI would get the interstate criminal conspiracy. The journalists would get the human interest story of systematic abuse. The IRS would get the tax implications of Austin's falsified business records. But the centerpiece of my attack would be the clients themselves. Austin had been stealing from them for years, charging premium rates for work done by exhausted associates at breakneck speed. They deserved to know that their trusted legal counsel was a criminal who'd been overcharging them while delivering substandard work. I'd identified 17 major clients who'd been significantly overcharged based on fraudulent time records. Each one would receive a detailed breakdown of exactly how much money Austin had stolen from them, along with documentation proving the fraud. More importantly, each client packet would include information about their legal rights and remedies for attorney misconduct. The beauty of targeting clients wasn't just the financial pressure it would create. These were powerful people, CEOs, board members, executives who controlled millions of dollars in legal fees. When they discovered they'd been defrauded, they wouldn't just demand refunds. They'd want blood. Austin had taught me that the key to winning was understanding your opponent's vulnerabilities. His greatest vulnerability wasn't legal, it was reputational. His entire business model depended on clients trusting him with their most sensitive corporate matters. Once that trust was broken, his career would be over, regardless of any criminal charges. Friday afternoon brought unexpected validation of my strategy. Emily rushed to my cubicle with news that made my pulse quicken. "The Henderson merger is collapsing," she whispered urgently. I overheard Austin on a conference call. "The client is questioning our billing practices and threatening to audit all previous invoices." Henderson Industries was our biggest client, representing nearly 30% of the firm's revenue. If they pulled out and demanded a billing audit, it would trigger a domino effect that could destroy the firm within weeks. "How did they find out?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Someone sent them documentation about fraudulent time entries. Anonymous tip, apparently." Someone. David Park, maybe, getting his revenge after being fired. Or Lisa Walsh, finally finding the courage to strike back. Or maybe one of the other associates who'd been quietly documenting abuse, waiting for the right moment to act. It didn't matter who'd fired the first shot. What mattered was that Austin's empire was already starting to crumble, and my coordinated attack would be the earthquake that brought down the rest of the structure. I spent that weekend in my apartment, fine-tuning every detail of my plan. The emails were scheduled to send automatically on Monday morning at precisely 9 a.m., ensuring that Austin would be in his office when his world exploded around him. The timing was crucial. I wanted him to be trapped at work, unable to flee or destroy evidence when the authorities arrived. Sunday night, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine, reviewing my work one final time. 6 months of documentation. Dozens of witnesses. Multiple criminal violations. Federal and state jurisdictions. Financial and reputational devastation. Austin Blackwell had spent years perfecting a system for destroying people's lives. Tomorrow, I would show him exactly how well I'd learned his lessons. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Whatever you're planning, sis, be careful. Powerful people don't go down easy." I typed back, "Don't worry, I learned from the best." But as I prepared for bed, setting my alarm for 5 a.m. to make final preparations, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. Austin was dangerous, cunning, and completely without scruples. Even cornered, he might find a way to strike back. I pushed the doubt away. I'd been careful, methodical, thorough. I had evidence he couldn't discredit, witnesses he couldn't silence, and allies he didn't know existed. The trap was perfect, the timing ideal, the execution flawless. Tomorrow, Austin Blackwell would learn what happened when you underestimated Chloe. Tomorrow, justice would finally have its day. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, Seattle's November sky matching my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully that day. My best navy suit, the one I'd worn to my interviews 6 months ago. If this was going to be my last day at Blackwell & Associates, I wanted to look like the competent professional I'd always been, not the exhausted victim Austin had tried to create. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., 2 hours before my scheduled emails would detonate Austin's world. The building was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of cleaning crews finishing their overnight shift. I made coffee, organized my desk, and waited. At 8:45, I watched Austin stride through the office doors with his usual swagger. He was humming that irritating tune again, probably anticipating another day of exploitation disguised as mentorship. He nodded at me with condescending approval. "Early again, Chloe. I like the dedication." "Just trying to stay ahead of things," I replied, checking my phone. 15 minutes until launch. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone chimed with the first delivery confirmation. Then another. Then a cascade of notifications as my carefully crafted emails reached their intended targets across 3 states and multiple federal agencies. Austin was in his office, probably reviewing the morning's billing reports, when his phone started ringing. I watched through his glass door as his expression shifted from mild annoyance to concern to something approaching panic. The first call ended, then immediately rang again. Then his desk phone. Then his cell phone. By 9:15, the office had transformed into a disaster zone. Austin was shouting into his phone, his face red with fury. Patricia sat at her desk with barely concealed satisfaction, fielding calls from reporters and transferring angry clients to voicemail. Emily caught my eye across the office and gave me the subtlest thumbs up. The first federal agent arrived at 9:30. I watched from my cubicle as two women in dark suits showed their credentials to the receptionist and asked to speak with Austin Blackwell. They were FBI, White Collar Crime Division, and they looked like they'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. Austin emerged from his office trying to project confidence, but I could see the fear in his eyes. This wasn't part of his plan. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling in real time, and he had no idea how to stop it. "Gentlemen, ladies," he corrected himself smoothly. "How can I help the Bureau today?" "Mr. Blackwell, we have some questions about your billing practices and employee management policies. This is Agent, and I'm Agent Kim. We'd like to discuss some allegations that have been brought to our attention." The word allegations hit Austin like a physical blow. His practiced smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Of course. Always happy to cooperate with law enforcement. Shall we speak in my office?" "Actually, we'd prefer to conduct this interview at our field office. More appropriate for the scope of our investigation." Scope of investigation. Those 3 words told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a preliminary inquiry or a fishing expedition. The FBI had enough evidence to open a formal investigation, which meant my documentation had landed in exactly the right hands. As the agents escorted Austin toward the elevator, he caught sight of me at my desk. For a split second, his mask slipped completely, and I saw the raw hatred in his eyes. He knew. Maybe not the specifics, but he understood that his downfall had an architect, and he was looking at her. I met his gaze steadily and smiled, not the fake submissive smile I'd been wearing for months, but something real and fierce and utterly without apology. The elevator doors closed, and Austin Blackwell disappeared from my life forever. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By noon, 3 major clients had terminated their relationships with the firm and demanded full billing audits. The Seattle Business Journal had retracted the Law Firm of the Year nomination and published a scathing article about the investigation. The Washington State Bar Association had frozen Austin's license, pending a full disciplinary review. Emily and I spent the afternoon fielding calls from former associates who'd heard the news and wanted to add their testimonies to the growing pile of evidence. David called from his new job at a public defender's office, laughing with joy. "I always knew someone would get him eventually. I just never imagined it would be so thorough." But the sweetest moment came at 3 p.m., when Patricia appeared at my desk with a manila envelope. "Severance package," she said with a straight face. "Mr. Blackwell instructed me to prepare termination paperwork for all associates before the agents took him away." Inside the envelope was a check for 6 months, salary, and a glowing letter of recommendation that Austin had obviously written months ago as part of his contingency planning. The irony was perfect. In preparing to destroy my career, he'd created documentation of my excellent performance that would help me land my next job. "Patricia," I said, looking up at the woman who'd been Austin's unwilling accomplice for over a decade, "what will you do now?" Her smile was radiant. "I'm thinking about retirement, or maybe helping my daughter with her bookstore. Turns out there are more important things than billable hours." By 5 p.m., the office was empty except for a few associates packing their belongings and security guards ensuring nobody tried to remove sensitive documents. The FBI had seized Austin's computers, client files, and financial records. Everything he'd built was being dismantled piece by piece. I sat at my desk, officially unemployed but feeling more free than I had in months. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Saw the news. Holy shit, Chloe. You actually did it." I had done it. Not just survived Austin Blackwell's attempt to destroy me, but turned his own weapons against him with surgical precision. Every manipulation tactic he'd taught me, every legal principle he'd drilled into my head, every strategic insight he'd shared, I'd used them all to build the perfect trap. The final email arrived in my personal inbox at 6 p.m. It was from Agent. Brief but satisfying. "Ms. Thank you for your cooperation and comprehensive documentation. Your evidence has been instrumental in advancing our investigation. We may need your testimony as this case proceeds, but wanted you to know that Mr. Blackwell has been formally charged with federal fraud, conspiracy, and violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO charges." Austin wasn't just facing professional discipline or civil lawsuits. He was looking at decades in federal prison, assuming he didn't cooperate fully with investigators and implicate whatever network of corrupt lawyers and clients had enabled his operation. I walked out of Blackwell and Associates for the last time as the sun was setting over Elliott Bay. The building looked different somehow, smaller, less imposing. The golden letters spelling out the firm's name already seemed tarnished, soon to be removed entirely. 3 weeks later, I started my new job at Rahman and Associates, a plaintiff's employment law firm that specialized in cases exactly like mine. My boss, Fatima Rahman, was everything Austin was and Blackwell wasn't. Ethical, supportive, and committed to actual justice rather than profit maximization. "We've been following the Blackwell case," Fatima told me during my first day orientation. "Impressive work. Not many people have the courage to take on that kind of systemic corruption." "I had help," I said, thinking of Emily, Patricia, Lisa, and all the other women who'd been brave enough to speak truth to power. The best victories usually do. 6 months after that gray November morning, I testified before a federal grand jury in Austin Blackwell's criminal trial. He looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, diminished without his expensive suits and intimidating office. The predatory smile was gone, replaced by the hollow expression of a man who'd finally faced consequences for his actions. His defense attorney tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee, seeking revenge, but my documentation was too thorough, my witnesses too credible, my evidence too overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Austin received 15 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $3.2 million in restitution to defrauded clients and abused employees. His law license was permanently revoked. Blackwell and Associates was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay victims. But the real victory wasn't Austin's destruction. It was the precedent his case set. The FBI created a task force specifically focused on attorney billing fraud, using my investigation as a template for identifying similar schemes. Law schools started teaching courses on workplace exploitation and legal ethics. Bar associations implemented new oversight procedures for monitoring associate treatment. Lisa Walsh went back to law school and now runs a nonprofit that helps abuse victims navigate the legal system. David Park was promoted to partner at his public defender's office. Emily left corporate law entirely and became a professor, teaching the next generation of lawyers about ethical practice. As for me, I discovered that revenge, when executed perfectly, tastes exactly like justice. Sweet, satisfying, and absolutely worth the wait. The email that destroyed Austin Blackwell was exactly 47 words long. Simple, direct, and devastating. Mr. Blackwell has been systematically defrauding clients and exploiting associates for years. Please find attached comprehensive evidence of criminal billing fraud, labor violations, and conspiracy. Additional witnesses are prepared to testify. Justice delayed is justice denied. Sincerely, Chloe. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are the simplest ones. Austin Blackwell spent years building an empire of exploitation, convinced that his victims were too weak, too scared, or too grateful to fight back. He was wrong about all of it. But especially about me. I was never his victim. I was his reckoning, wrapped in a navy suit and armed with the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, was more than enough.